What's up, everybody? Chris Pennell here, and I'm giving you 5 players you need to be starting in Week 8 of Fantasy Football. If you do enjoy, make sure you leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new, and let's get right into it. We're going to kick it off at quarterback, and my start of the week here for Week 8 is Jared Goff of the Detroit Lions. He was my sit of the week last week in a really tough matchup versus Baltimore. They were allowing the least amount of points per game to the quarterback position. Ended his day with 10, despite throwing the ball 53 times in that game for 284 yards, did not get into the end zone. But I think times can change here touchdown-wise versus the Las Vegas Raiders. Jared Goff and the Detroit Lions offense tends to play a lot better at home in Ford Field. We have a 27-point implied team total, which is one of the highest of the entire week for the Detroit Lions. No David Montgomery, so they're going to be throwing the football because they can't just slam Jahmyr Gibbs down their throat 30-plus times. He's going to be heavily involved in the passing game. We have great weapons here, and it's a pretty solid matchup versus the Las Vegas Raiders, who are mid-pack versus quarterbacks, but not a defense that I'm concerned about overall. So I like Jared Goff here. I like his chances for around 250, 270 passing yards with 1 to 2 passing touchdowns. And on the season, he's quarterback number 8 on the year, and I think the good times keep rolling. And next, we have the running back position. I have 2 for you this week. Number 1 for me is a guy that has to be started this week, just based off the matchup and the volume in his role in his offense. It's Isaiah Pacheco of the Kansas City Chiefs, and he is in an absolute dream spot. This Broncos defense is getting shredded by running backs week in, week out. Currently on the season, they're ranking dead last, 32nd, allowing 38.4 fantasy points per game, over 140 rushing yards, 55 receiving yards, nearly 7 catches per game, and 0.57 receiving touchdowns. And Isaiah Pacheco, while he's typically viewed as the early down back and Jerick McKinnon gets the third down work, while McKinnon's not completely going away, we've seen Isaiah Pacheco's role in the offense kind of change recently. 6 targets 2 weeks ago, 4 targets last week. He's caught all of them, so it's 10 targets the prior 2 weeks. And if we're going to add that on with 13 to 18 carries each and every single week, and this is a very positive game script in this matchup versus the Broncos on the road as 7.5-point favorites, there's nothing not to like out of Pacheco. So if you got him, you're starting him. I know he was terrible on the ground last week versus the Chargers. 13 carries in the 30s for the yards, ended up getting that receiving touchdown at the end of the game to kind of salvage his day. But this should be a smash spot on the ground for Pacheco. I would not be surprised if we can get 80-plus yards here and hopefully multiple rushing touchdowns. It's tough to project touchdowns, but this is one of the absolute best spots for it, and he's going to get the opportunity. And for those of you looking at Vegas odds this week, Isaiah Pacheco is sitting roughly right around 65 rushing yards and minus 135 for a touchdown. So in terms of a coin flip, it's a little bit better than that he finds the end zone in his implied probability. And I definitely think there's a chance for those both going over. The next running back that I am starting no matter what is Breece Hall of the New York Jets. He comes in as RB20 on the season. Keep in mind, though, a lot of the year he was playing alongside or even behind Dalvin Cook. And Dalvin Cook, let me tell you, he is beyond washed. So it's about time they give this guy the full reins. They've seen the snaps increase the prior 2 weeks as well. So heading into the season from weeks 1 through 4, 31, 34, 49, and 44% of the snaps. The last 2 weeks, 52 and 66%. And he has definitely taken advantage of this. 22 carries, 177 yards versus Denver. Got to the end zone, ripped off an 80-yard touchdown. Also has 8 targets the past 2 weeks as well. So we have a nice little floor boost there because versus Philly in week 6 wasn't the greatest game on the ground. Only 3.2 yards per carry, 12 carries for 39 yards. We also saw 5 targets, 5 catches for 54 yards. And it's a great matchup versus the New York Giants. They currently rank 22nd versus opposing running backs, allowing over 120 rushing yards per game and a rushing touchdown. Not giving up too much to the air, but that can be a bit of a noisy stat just based off the team or running backs you played, especially in such a small sample size of only a handful of games so far this season. So with Breece Hall averaging 6.4 yards per carry, which is a bit skewed after that monster run, he's in a great spot and he should be started in all formats. And moving on to our pass catchers, we have Zay Flowers leading us off at the wide receiver position. He is my start of the week. Love the matchup versus Arizona Cardinals. And while we don't typically love pass catchers from Baltimore because Lamar Jackson's a running quarterback and they don't really throw the ball too much in that offense, if you're looking at the numbers on the season, Lamar's only throwing the ball 27 times per game, which is way off elite level quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes. He's sitting at over 35 times per game. Justin Herbert at 33. Kirk Cousins, not that he's an elite level quarterback, but 38 times per game. So the volume isn't quite as much, but he is soaking up a large majority of these targets. Both him and Mark Andrews is basically how this offense functions through the air. Because on the season, Zay Flowers has a pretty healthy target share, currently sitting at 28.29%, 7.5 targets per game, not getting into the end zone too much. Over 5.5 catches, 61% weight opportunity share. The ADOT's not as high as I would love it to be at 9.1. I'd like some more explosive down the field plays, but still 63 yards per game and 5.5 catches in a very plus matchup. Hoping those averages can get ticked up here. Because currently on the year, the Arizona Cardinals are 27 versus receivers, allowing nearly 200 receiving yards per game. Lamar went off last week. Zay Flowers didn't exactly have a ceiling game, but we know the potential is there for the rookie, and I wouldn't be surprised if it happens here versus Arizona. And it's not like he's really been boom or bust this season either. He only has one game in PPR scoring below double-digit points. Week 1, 17, 10, 13, 8 versus Cleveland, but that's about as tough as a matchup as you can ask for. As a wide receiver, they're currently allowing the least amount of points per game to the position. Then 12 versus Pittsburgh, 17 versus Tennessee, 11 versus Detroit. Like I said, we were kind of missing that big boom game from him so far this year, but it's coming at some point, and I want to be ahead of the curve before it actually happens if we're chasing. Our next wide receiver, this might not be a popular take, and I'm sure a lot of you are done with him. You're benching him this week, and you're waiting for another boom week. But why wait for the boom week? Be ahead of the curve, start him before it happens, and then you're chasing, and then you miss the boom week, and then you get the floor week the week after. And I realize I'm sure he's hurt a lot of feelings so far this season, but Calvin Ridley, the Jacksonville Jaguars, I think needs to be started this week. Now, if you're deciding between him and Christian Kirk, I prefer Christian Kirk, but assuming you don't have both, Calvin Ridley, well, I don't want to say he's due for a big game because there's no such thing as just being due. It's not how it works. But if the opportunity is here versus Pittsburgh, this is a great matchup versus Steelers defense. They're currently 30th versus receivers. That means they allow the third most points per game to the position, and we know the upside with Calvin Ridley. He's had 2 good games this year. That's sad to say because he's played like 7 games so far. But he had 27 week 1 versus Indy, and then week 5 versus Buffalo in London, 23.6 points on 8 targets, 7 catches, 122 yards, only 2 touchdowns on the season. But this is definitely a week where I could see Calvin Ridley popping off. They're allowing 44.6 points per game to wide receivers, 206 receiving yards per game, over a receiving touchdown. He's got a 37.7% market share. Other teams' air yards in this offense. 20% target share. 8 out of 15. The problem is only 3.8 catches per game on 52 receiving yards despite 7 targets per game. But there's a 22-point implied team total here. There are 2.5-point favorites, and they're on the road in Pittsburgh. But like I said, their pass defense has been buns this year. So if Calvin Ridley's going to go off, it's going to have to be soon. He does get some decent matchups in the future here soon as well. So we have a bye week in week 9, but then San Francisco, Tennessee, Houston, all pretty easy matchups through the air for Calvin Ridley. But I love the spot versus Pittsburgh, and hopefully this is the week he gets right back on track before the bye week. And starts of the week at the tight end position. It would have been Dalton Kincaid, but I'm recording this on Friday, and that is cheating. Hopefully y'all had him, picked him up on waivers, and you played him because you'd be pretty happy with the result. But number 1 for me is Jake Ferguson of the Dallas Cowboys. And while I don't really care about matchups too much when it comes to the tight end position, I do care about opportunity and involvement in the offense, and Jake Ferguson has both pretty much locked down. But this actually does happen to be a pretty good matchup, just on paper at least. Los Angeles Rams are currently 26 versus tight ends, allowing 62 yards and nearly half a receiving touchdown per game. Specifically, 2 tight ends. We have a high implied team total here at 25.5. They're 6.5-point favorites at home. And if we're looking at the route participation for Jake Ferguson, the highest we saw all year was the last game they played in week 6 versus the Chargers. It was at 73%, 56, 61, 46, and 64 the weeks prior. Got all the way up to 33 routes, 94.3% route participation right there. That is plenty of opportunity for a tight end. So if you're hurting this week, not like there's any bye weeks or anything, but you never know. Maybe you're on the fence with 2 low-end tight end ones. Jake Ferguson will get the nod from me. And lastly, a tight end with Zach Ertz being placed on the IR. We have Trey McBride as an excellent streamer this week because the tight end position in Arizona has been used quite heavily. Zach Ertz was sporting roughly around a 20% target share, and now Trey McBride, who was actually seeing increased snaps and involvement in the offense the prior 2 weeks before Zach Ertz went down. Now he's a standalone player here, and I actually don't think he's the worst tight end out there. So if he's going to be the main guy tight end, which he is, and we can get 5+ targets, I will take it. And they'll be trailing in this game. Baltimore is a bit of a tougher defense, but I don't really care about matchups too much when it comes to tight ends. And Josh Dobbs is going to have to throw the football quite a bit, and Trey McBride is going to be the main option here. So again, if we get 5+ targets, I like his chances of getting 30-40 yards with a chance of a touchdown. With that being said, guys, that's all I got for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure you leave a like down below. Subscribe on your way out. I wish you all the best of luck this week. If you have any questions, leave them down below. I'll be more than happy to answer them. But best of luck to y'all. I'll see y'all next time.